Trying to decide what to do with their loan here, because I'm taking into account the French victory conditions for getting units off the map here. Everything's worth 1 point each in general in terms of losses, stuff that's on the chart here. Of course, temporary losses don't count for crap because as long as the commander is around, they can rally him. But permanent losses will count. But the thing is, I have to get to a 230 balanced, 230 total in the balance. I have 97 strength points available here. That doesn't quite get me there if I could get them all off. Because remember, if I get over 40 off, then they're doubled. So 97 comes out to like 194. It's not quite there. So I think I would be unable to just bash the British aside, and I'm not going to get all of these off if that's the case. Which means I have to win something more significant than the Battle of Quatre Bras, or I have to shift forces in this direction. As far as I'm concerned, that means I have to make the move against Ligny. So I think I'm going to be trying to send Delhomme that way. That's my thinking. And there aren't a lot of turns, you know. So out of the 6 p.m. turn, Vendôme has pulled back. He's going to try undemoralizing units. Now remember, he doesn't necessarily succeed. He has to roll a die on each unit he tries to bring back, but once he undemoralizes the force, so he may just try for the cav first, then the other units become easier. So the lowest risk option is the cav, but he doesn't get to do that this turn. He wasn't far enough away, and he may still knob me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, he's not quite. Depends on what the Prussians do here. My main force of French, this is still 3rd Corps here, holding the flank. The main course of the French is to try to pin some of the 1st Corps down over here. I couldn't really safely move forward any further with Girard, and the guards can't really engage, but I can use them to hold ground very effectively. Nothing wants to approach them. I've got to be kind of careful that the Prussians don't, say, break through here and cut my supply line. This road is absolutely vital to me, and it's not all that well defended. Over here there's a lot more roads, so I was able to shift my axis of attack, and I'm going to, mainly I'm just really covering the action moving against the rear of the 1st Corps there, because the units that are pinned might end up either holding the whole corps back or just having to be abandoned in a retreat, trying to escape from D'Erlon's outflank. And this is why Napoleon wanted those troops available. I don't know if he would have sent them as far down as he did. I think he wanted them over here and then to curve around. But this was kind of a fast route that kept a threat in both directions, so that was appealing. Anyway, we'll see how... There aren't a lot of combats, and they're not necessarily very good, but they could be sufficient to really cause the Prussians some hurt. So the Brits over here are concentrating to try to cover that flank, push the French back a little bit, prevent them from gaining any ground there. And that should be pretty easy. But over here, the Prussians have a struggle. They've got to cover D'Erlon. So they moved most of 1st and 2nd Corps into that kind of position there. But they still have to make these attacks. Now, those are almost certain to give them retreat results. They're still in command. I may want to put Blucher somewhere a little bit more central. Not in the middle of the French advance, though. Let's put him back here. He's still not able to really help with the 3rd Corps. 3rd Corps is not in command, and they're spread out all over hell and creation. That doesn't matter too much what matters is that they're not in command at all. So if any attack is pressed against them, they're going to fall back. And that's kind of the issue with anything when you start spreading out like this. You can kind of cordon a little bit, but you can't really, you can't hold a tight cordon. You're going to have to bring your corps together to actually operate them because of the command rules. So that's kind of, I think, something that works better here than it would in the individual folio games. In the individual folio games, you have the Napoleon at Waterloo type thing. You have no command and control, so you can send a unit around the flank and whatever, and it's no big deal. It can do all kinds of weird stuff for you. You don't have anything like that here. You have the core commands holding together. There may be a little bit too little ability to send forces around on special tasks on this, but I think that's better than the too much that's sort of inherent in the base system. Anyway, let's see. I don't expect much to happen here, except that I'll bump these slick counters and they'll slide all over in a way that the old ones wouldn't. I really just expect the Prussians to pull back a hex. And then the question is, what's the French reaction to all this? You know, the main force is Gerard here. He's going to have the real task of where does he want to punch, and everything else is going to support that because Van Damme is knocked out for now. The guard can't be used yet. You know, I do have to worry about the breaking a unit here. We're getting pretty close. First corps for the Prussians is at 10-15, so we got to find some place to rest the Prussians. Prussians actually won one of these battles. The one thing they didn't want to have was a unit eliminated, but they don't have to advance. They didn't have cav involved, so that's okay. Over here, the Brits advanced on their far left, but Brunswick got knocked back, and this opened up an opportunity. If the French advanced here, they could kill the Duke himself. However, he's not that important. Even if I don't modify the rules to any extent, well, he means that the entire Brunswick command is pretty much out for the campaign, which is bad, but it isn't that big. But what it also, in the artillery could still bombard though, it also means though that this French unit would have been in a position forcing it to attack all of these, instead of being in a position partially surrounding the 5th Division here, which is a tastier target, to tell you the truth. I can't dispatch any of D'Erlon because he's way up here. Well, Ney could actually command that unit and throw it in, but I might be able to swing enough units in to get a chance at actually destroying a British division, and that would be a pretty good result out of Quatre-Bras, to tell you the truth. The French are not really capable of launching a real attack here. It's just too far around that side. The only way I could have done it, no, I couldn't have. Some of D'Erlon's units, I could have started to push them around, but as I see it, I'm basically trying to fight for nothing to happen over in Quatre-Bras, trying to hold the line. You know, making attacks where I have to, but whatever. Over here, you can see D'Erlon in position, but here's the thing, he's not in command, so he can't push up against the Prussian corps and start destroying them, but he can provide something of a barrier to them, and kind of, he's not close enough to really be preventing their escape, but he can channel it in a way that the French can maybe use. I'm sliding Napoleon over, but he's not going to be in command next turn either. I couldn't quite, there was too big a gap here. I couldn't quite cover it. The main assault happening across the river here, though, that's kind of trying to drive the Prussian corps apart, which might allow me to eliminate one of them fairly easily. And then continuing to strain over here, my eventual intention is to have Grouchy in charge of whatever's going on here, and Napoleon trying to run the flank. having 3 commanders on this field is so much better than only having 2. Blucher is just incapable of commanding this big a force in this much space, and no single commander could do. I am still using some of my guards in frontline positions. Now that's not entirely safe because the enemy can attack the guards, and if they don't get repulsed, then the guards are forced to counterattack, and then you have some potential, some possibility of breaking the army that way. But the guards are pretty potent units. They're not really in exposed positions. They're out in the front, but someone would have to work pretty hard. You could get 2 stacks against this, so that would probably be about the best. But chances are I can manipulate things and use a soak to prevent the guards from being in a battle that they're likely to lose. They might lose some strength points though, because as you boost the combat odds up, you end up in a situation where you're more likely to actually take losses. I think he was out of range after the Prussian move. If not, I cheated. But 3rd Corps, Von Damme tried to recuperate that cav. He failed, but he did get the other 2 units back. And now his morale's back, and he's actually a viable force. With Napoleon coming into play, that's going to be important. Here, really to point out, in these types of games with the kind of old school operational feel to them, even if they're, in this case, a tactical design, I find the more interesting thing is the moment before any of the attacks are rolled. The actual results, not much. A push here, a push here. We did destroy 1 unit, and that demoralizes... I don't know who he is. Zethan. His corps, which, he's going to have a tough time getting out of there with a demoralized corps because he can't move into zones of control. He automatically gets retreats. That's going to cause some serious problems with units in his backfield the way they are. And Blucher's got a lot of difficulty trying to exploit any kind of division between French forces at this, which might have been available had this not happened, just by being able... It's sort of an interior lines type of situation. I find the opposite with the games that I tend towards more, with the firepower and, morale checks and all that stuff, more like a mini-style game. With those games, it's usually the result of the whole turn's actions that's interesting, rather than, hey, how did you position? What are you set up with? The movement's important, there's no question. You could stop at either point and it's about equal. But here I just feel like the more interesting thing is setting up the attack. The actual resolution of it. The combat charts are deterministic enough that, and they have some variance, but largely you can just say, yeah, look, here's what's happening, So, anyway. I was under a somewhat mistaken impression that demoralization included most of the effects of being out of command. You can't advance after combat, but you can still attack, which means you might be able to fight your way out of this bag here. What it does, though, is it affects the movement costs, so you're not going to be as quickly able to shift across. I don't know if I took that into account properly. I think I have. I haven't been moving Von Damme's corps around much until after the rally. So now I have to figure out, I've already launched my attack with the Brits, but I have to figure out what's going on in the Prussians. And I really kind of divide up my turns this way. I go focus on one little puddle, and then another one, and then another one. And don't even worry about the command and control restrictions. I don't follow the sequence of play entirely. Like, I handle this entirely, then I handle pretty much all the command here, and then movement for one step, movement for another. But then when I do combat, I do wait for that. So, you know, just to be inconsistent in all things. Fortunately, though, this unit was caught out of command. You can see I tried to move down to get it into command, but it's got a problem. It's got zones on either side. So this attack is an out of command attack. He must make an attack. This guy couldn't get out of there. It ends up being an attack or retreat because of the command situation. And these two big units are gone. So that's pretty huge. The French could advance if they want to, but of course, since they don't have cav, they don't want to. And that's going to make the job of recovering the first corps here pretty damn impossible, I would say. Well, my use of Durlon turns out not to be that ahistorical or historically breaking. I haven't been able to engage with him. I'm going to be able to get some artillery in place. He's not where he would have ended up during the day. But this is the last turn of the day. This is the last chance he would have to launch an actual attack. And I was not able to actually help. Now, he is able to kind of create sort of a problem here where the Prussian First Corps is probably going to get mostly eliminated. But, you know, honestly, the Prussian army looks like it's in better shape than I think it historically was coming out of Ligny, even if it loses that. Over here, nothing has happened. I've pretty much kept the same positioning and just going to launch the required attacks. I don't see any movement happening in Cadabra. The reason that this is key, that nothing happens here, other than, hey, nothing's happened yet. In night terms, there's not going to be any combat. So, now, there are some possibilities. The rules are a little crappy about this. You're not allowed to leave an enemy hex in night turns, an enemy controlled hex. I don't think anything's changed here, except that you can't. You operate as if you're out of command, i.e. you're not going to enter an enemy occupied hex, but I think that was already the case. And you're not allowed to reorganize, which means there's no rest at night, so you might as well just march. But the problem is, if you're in contact with the enemy, you squat down and you stay there. And I'm not sure how much I believe that. Nighttime, it's hard enough to disengage in the game, and not being able to disengage even at night seems a little beyond what the game should be requiring. But so far I've been kind of playing by the rules. In terms of the leaders, I kind of decided I'm not going to fudge with that, and I may leave the night rolls too and let, you know, some units essentially surrender because they have to be left behind for night. It seems it won't turn out an issue in this game because we've managed the disengagement. The Prussians weren't engaged to begin with. The Brits destroyed one of Rael's units, and then, I apologize for any mispronunciation there. It's either that or Riley. I really don't know how it's supposed to be pronounced. I know I looked it up, but I'm doing my best. And they managed to get a retreat for the French in another unit. So they've cleared the line here. The Prussians have cleared the line. And now the two armies are going to fall back in different directions. And that's really where the problem lies. So the Prussians have to find a defensive line. And I'm beginning to think that that's somewhere in here. Further up, further south than Wavre was engaged. But streams aren't that big a defensive line, and I'll have one to fall back on if I need to. For the Anglo-Allied army, I'm also not sure I want to fall all the way back. This is actually a nice choke point. There's a couple of trails here that I have to watch, but otherwise all the roads go through this little narrow area, and likewise here, all the roads go through a fairly narrow section. And the roads are necessary for supply, so if I can control those, I can prevent the French from being able to push too much further back. So we may actually see a full 3 days of battle happening because the Allies are unwilling to pull back as far as they did historically. How's my time here? Okay, so we'll be going quite a bit further than this point on this video. Probably make our way through the night. Nobody's going to engage each other at night. It's time to try to figure out, what can be and can't be defended. If the French can sort of slip around this way and get a control over that trail, the British position here might be untenable. They've got a problem, though, if they give that up. Because down to here, we start seeing the trail runs us all the way back that way. And, okay, sure, this is our main road, and it's what we need to defend, but we don't really want to see the Prussian force get eliminated and the French not advance into the Waterloo area. Point-wise, that first corps is destroyed, the leader's dead, they're not coming back, and really the only thing I can do is use a couple of them. Well, Blucher's able to command 2 of them in addition to his 2 other corps, so he'll be able to throw them in occasionally, but for the most part I'll probably put them someplace in a backwater defensive position, just in terms of someplace they're doing good, but I can't really count on them even to counterattack. Just kind of an indication to the French, hey, you can't go here, there's something there already. First of the night turns comes, and the French movement for it attempts to kind of try to slip around the British position, around the Prussian position here. And here's where the real problem is. Whatever terrain I give up as the Prussians, I could lock this in and try to create a defensive line along here, maybe anchored at this chateau. And that would be of some value, except that the French eventually will be able to circumvent it. Now there is one problem. The French have to keep their supply line in place. And right now that's coming out of here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm pretty much at the extent of my supply line, which means as long as the Prussians can extend their line and hold this kind of territory, they're not going to go anywhere. And right now they're holding the majority of the French army in check. Of course, on the next day there might be battles, but, or I may choose to pack up and walk away. The problem, of course, is wherever I walk to, I'm probably going to be chased by the French. It doesn't have the feel of the actual campaign, where the Prussians kind of slip away at night and the French sit there and camp and rest. There's no benefit to sitting still in this, unlike in the more tactical games. La Retour de l'Empereur handles that quite well, actually, because you can do straggler recovery type stuff during the nights. And you also, if you're playing with the fatigue rules, recover your fatigue overnight if you don't move, and you pay high penalties for moving. But instead what we have is this jockeying for position, which is kind of unrealistic in the sense that the troops probably weren't maneuvering around all that much in the evening. But also, if they were, they might blunder into each other and fight. And there's something artificial about these kind of zones of control that prevent anybody from entering because it just happens to be a night turn. There's something very, very weird feeling about that. And the overnight is starting to look like it's going to feel very, very gamey overall. Will it destroy the whole experience? I don't know, but I don't think you play one of these games to get that really clear view of everything that's going on and why. You play it, you might get a general feel of the type of campaign. And somebody pointed out how they didn't think the zone of control rules and such not really applied here because they're essentially World War II style rules. Actually, I think they hold up better here than they do in the AH Classics, but they still don't hold up correctly. So in something like Battle of the Bulge, the old AH game, you don't have exploitation movement of any kind or anything like that. So you end up with a really static type of feel to the campaign. And this really has that too. But on the other hand, when you've got lines of men shooting at each other with Napoleonic muskets, areas of the line were pretty static and weren't really doing much. The only thing you get weird here is there's these little pushes back and forth if you clash those lines together, which is kind of, it seems like there's too much movement in those cases. The units should really be parked next to each other, not doing anything for the most part, unless you make a significant push. And the game scale doesn't really cover that. It puts you too close to each other. You're too far away, or potentially too far away at 2 hex. Well, you're too far away at 2 hexes for the kind of desultory fighting that happened a lot of times during these battles that didn't tend to cause any difference in the situation. But on the other hand, when you look at it from the overall view, if not much is moving on the line, even if there's little bumps and such, not as there were along here, you can kind of say, hey, there's a lot abstracted here, and you're catching the general flavor of what's going on, even if you're not getting specifics. It's not like your more detailed tactical representations tend to get the specifics that they cover right as well as the overall. Usually one suffers at the hands of the other. Anyway, the biggest gripe I have is just the amount of effort involved in figuring out my attacks, and that starts to get more. You get used to doing it, and you get used to the little tricks of the trade, and they are just that. I'm sure there are ones in the firepower. I remember in Terrible Swift Sword used to having, hey, I always want to get on the I always want to fire 3 firepower exactly, or 5 or something like that. No, 3 or 6. Was it? I don't know. Anyway, there was one number of firepower I always wanted to achieve because it just was the best chart in the returns value. Well, likewise, when you're figuring out the little geometric puzzles around each little line, that's the same kind of thing, and eventually they become kind of a second nature, I'm sure. It's just more painful for me because I've stayed away from these kind of games for most of my gaming time, and then when I do learn and figure out how to cope with them, I invariably forget, because for the same reason that I stay away, they're not providing exactly what I want. They're not giving me the view that I'm particularly interested in, so I don't end up optimizing, seamlessly in my head. Anyway, on to the Allied turn. I'm really not sure what to do with them. Do I give ground or not? Do I try to hold the line here along these roads? With the Prussians, I just don't see another answer other than try to hold it. But I could shorten it. I'm not sure I'm in the best of terrain here. So I'm thinking this is a shorter, better line. So if I can defend some of this woods and hold the road across some of these towns here, that may be a better solution than where I appear to be right now. It's entered into kind of this weird maneuver phase because of the rules for Nightfall. We have Riel really stretched thin. No big deal though. Brits aren't going to get in past this line. It's a nice picket, and it's allowing me to throw some cav around this way and threaten an attack from the rear, which, if I can manage to throw one unit in or something, I can kind of subvert the entire line that way. I think I screwed up on my time track. I think that one was correct and this one was incorrect. So I got some Brits coming in already that are actually Dutch coming in that I think I missed. And then, over here I got Mouton showing up, which is giving me enough weight to threaten this side. With Derlon over here, I'm sending one of the Cav Corps to help maybe subvert that side of the English line as well. I've got to be careful, but if I can put enough threat in, I can force them to fall back. And then the question comes to, hey, where do they want to defend? Now, if it's the English alone, they pretty much have to defend this line. There's just not enough British troops to try to, cover the river or something along those lines. So that's something to keep in mind is, we didn't have Ligny turn out as bad for the Prussians as the real Ligny did, I don't think. And given that, only one corps was wrecked. Well, the one's close to it. But when I played it, the entire Prussian army was wiped out, which of course meant the French win Waterloo, because the Fourth Corps is not enough to throw in their way to prevent them. But what we have here is there's sufficient Prussians to hold the line here, maybe, which means the Brits are induced to try to hold this line rather than say, hey, let's see how long we can hold, the Waterloo-style line. Even though the terrain here is much stronger with these chateaux in place. We might be able to, do a little strong point here and fall back and do another little strong point. We've got 3 days to survive. One problem with not falling back is maybe those 3 days will be all fighting, and that may wear the Brits out in a way that historically they weren't. And as long as I can keep the Prussians kind of pinned here, they're not going to be able to support the Brits. So maybe I do need to fall back. I'm not sure. Let's try to hold their position, or the Anglo-Allied army. Brits is easier. Well, the Prussians do fall back. I'm seeing that the line across here cuts things. There's no way. The French can try to subvert it by going around it. But this is my narrowest choke point. And likewise, this is my choke point here. If I throw some Brunswickers out that way, I've kind of got things locked in. We're going to the 6 a.m. turn. This is when the French commanders decide it's time to go to sleep. And we'll see when they decide to wake up. That's going to slow down any attacks. Now, is that the accurate situation? Yeah, well, on the second day, this 27th, Napoleon slept in late. And then, or didn't sleep that late, but then he took a nap. And nothing really happened during that time. Waterloo, he also slept kind of late, but what you see here is there's rain turns, and that's really a large effect of what happened. His troops were disposed properly and everything, but he wasn't willing to start the battle because the ground was still too wet for his artillery to be effective. He could have, and we tested out, I think, some of the possible effects of that in the Retour de l'Empereur. Hey, you don't have to do a frontal assault and use your grand batteries. You could maneuver around and try to engage in some other way. And not that I was sitting in the historical Waterloo situation. The Brits were in much worse situation. The French were in better position, and we were pretty sure there weren't going to be any big Prussian reinforcements coming in. Anyway, here we've again got a very, very different battle campaign developing. It looks like. It's hard to tell. I'd say the Prussians lost at Ligny, but not as bad as they did historically, probably. And I think they've got enough force to try to hold this line here. Maybe they should be just backing up there to begin with, because this is an exposed position. Wellington himself said, wow, that's terrible. They're going to lose there, basically. I wouldn't want to fight that battle regarding the Prussian position that they were taking. And then over here, this may also be a battle Wellington wouldn't want to fight, though, especially with this extra cav corps coming in. But we'll see. I feel like I have to trade off space and for time, and I've got a fair number of reinforcements coming in on both sides that maybe I can keep the French away from any possibility of getting that Brussels road exit. And then it comes down to numbers, and numbers wise, I don't remember where we were, but I think close to 100 casualties here. Let me take a quick look. 5, 11, 14, 18, 27, 30, 46, 56, no. 61, 62, 63, 67 hits on the Allies. And from that, I have to deduct the French losses, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we're at like 54. That's nowhere near where we need to be. It's 200 and something. I don't remember. It's like in the 250 range, a little higher than that. 230, sorry. So we've got to bring on a much more general engagement than we have. The French can't just maneuver around unless it's going to get them off the map and threatening the British supply line. It seems like Napoleon woke up and made himself a good strong pot of coffee. And now I have a bit of a conundrum here. What I'd like to do is launch Napoleon in this direction, go wake up Ney, send him over here to go wake up Grouchy, and see what they can do kind of around the edges of the Prussian line. Unfortunately, I am one hex short, and a couple of movement points actually, of being able to get to Ney, which means I won't be able to wake him up next turn. It's only a 1 in 6 chance that they're going to wake up naturally. On the other hand, I can exactly reach Grouchy, which I think means that just because of where I'm set up and, you know, I didn't really think about this. There's a lot of things one doesn't think about, but, you know, I'm positioning Napoleon where he might be able to command things if he wakes up. Well, I think I may actually launch my attack against the Prussians instead. I've had an incomplete victory. If I throw the weight of Napoleon's force against the Prussian left, I think I can sweep them from the field, and then the Brits will have to leave here anyway. And by sweep from the field, I mean not necessarily destroy them, but force them back. The problem, of course, is there's a lot of Prussians once the 4th Corps comes in, and that's one reason I'd kind of like to drive the Brits back. But I think whatever I do, either both are going to fall back, or just one, or both are going to hold, because if I get to here, I'm subverting the entire, you know, the other side. So if either line is going to fall back, both have to, and that's a problem for the Allies, just because they have different sources of supply. The Brits have that board edge, the Prussians this board edge. Nobody's up in the north. Ready to enter the first daylight turn on the 17th. The Prussians have pulled back a little bit on their left flank just to form a more solid line. I've still got room to fall back. I've got a couple of units of 3rd Corps that kind of got separated. That's no big deal in this game. And hey, nobody's over here to command the French, so I'm sending Pirch back. He's not far enough yet, but I'm going to try to rally and form up some additional troops for 2nd Corps. I think I'm going to need them. And I should have started that movement earlier, but whatever. Over here, Wellington's going to try to hold. We got some Dutch coming in here. Not terribly sturdy units, but I'm not facing that much. Plus, Ney's not awake yet, right? Uxbridge starting to make his way over. More reinforcements coming soon, so we should I don't know. By my guess, we should be able to hold that line against what Ney's got, especially with the reinforcements coming. Those reinforcements come earlier in the Retour. I'm not sure. I think I would suspect that the level of research in the more recent game is probably greater, and it probably is reflecting maybe not that Uxbridge actually made it all the way up to Catabrad in time, but that he reasonably could have, that he paused perhaps over here and he's coming on a little later in this game, maybe to reflect that pause, but it gives the Brits a little bit more of a potential for holding the line further south than they did. Because, I mean, historically, Wellington wasn't sure whether to fall back or not. And it wasn't until he knew that Blucher was falling back, that he was routed, that Wellington made his decision. Because he couldn't risk allowing the French to cut through his supply line. Now, with Blucher's army in a position that looks reasonable, maybe not as strong as where I was here, and that was not easy to dig them out of, but not terrible. Controlling the road lines, I don't see an easy way. The French, they could run up here, but that's about as far as they get, is 5 hexes from this trail, and only if I strongly control things. So I've really got to fight the Prussians to get through the paths that there are. I can't say, hey, I'm going off map and controlling that stuff. And likewise here, there's no path. There's nothing going forward unless I bust through either here or at the main line. So, go for it, man. I feel like the Allied army is in a reasonable position to try to hold. Grouchy started his attack, and Thielmann got kind of caught into having to counterattack. But lucky for him, he had Blucher in range, so he did so, but got repulsed anyway. So he fell back a little bit there. Otherwise, the Prussians are holding their line. We sent Pirch back where he can start doing some rallying. I wonder whose unit this is. This is 5th Division. I really ought to be trying to rally that, but I kind of need my commanders in range, although he could have probably pulled back. Why don't I do that? 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I go back here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I'm far enough away if I run back there that I can actually try to rally that unit. And I need every unit I can get. Over here, the Dutch and Brunswick forces attacked these cav, but they lost. One of the cav was forced to advance, but the other was not. Napoleon is going back over to the French side turn, which of course was first, is within range that at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that he can go wake Ney up and bring him a thermos of coffee. But yeah, we got a fair amount of British reinforcements coming into place, to the point where this is, about the kind of width of a line that I'd have to defend up at Waterloo. Now, granted, this isn't as good a defensive terrain as those chateaus and everything, but I'm also not facing the entire French army here. I'm facing very, very little, and if I could, I'd love to dispatch some of my forces over to help the Prussians, because they're facing the majority of the French army. Just falling back away from them doesn't do the Prussians much good, though, simply because there's not great terrain anywhere moving forward, and I've got to maintain a link to that east side of the board. If I don't have that, I don't have an army anymore, basically. So that'll move us on to what? 10 o'clock. We're back to hour-long turns. They're longer turns, 3 hours each in the night. That's a pretty common thing for the games to do. So, you know, it's not like the troops are marching all night long or anything. She's finding his way to chisel his way into Prussian Third Corps here. Nothing over here. Nothing happening. There's no command over there. I need these forward. We gotta be careful because I don't know quite the extent of where I have guard units. I know I had one involved in this battle over here, but I think Grouchy had him under command, I hope. And then Napoleon's gone over here to wake up Ney. Started to get... I have to make a decision of where I want Napoleon and where I want Ney. Napoleon could take command of this entire section, but I don't know that I have a strong offensive role there any longer. Whereas I probably have one here, and so he's more useful there. In which case maybe I shouldn't be running around waking up Ney. In fact, Ney just woke up on his own because he was attacked, which means I can get Napoleon. Let's see, he was back around here. I can get Napoleon back here. And start things over there. Move the 2nd Cav command over here because there's one unit, except that's a 3rd command, 3rd Cav command, sorry. There's one unit I wanted to wake up over there. Over here, this Cav withdrew before combat. Hey, I finally learned that to use that rule. There was no Cav facing it. And that's kind of the role that they're playing there, is just prevent the Allies from being able to collapse the line quickly. I'm a little worried about what Ney has over there, but the problem is really Napoleon's one decent commander, not as good as Wellington here with his 4, but his corps are bigger, so it kind of works pretty well. So, I mean, he's better than Blucher. He's probably better than Wellington in the overall, just because of the particulars of the corps. But he can only be in one place. Grouchy's not bad. Ney is pretty lousy here. And I've got 3 different segments of the battle. Now, I've got 3 different segments of the battle. The Allies only have 2 leaders, and that's their problem. That's where the Prussians are going to have a real difficulty. But there is sort of an interior lines type of thing here, so Blucher's going to be able to command both. If I can just get my general back from raising the dead. The French success over here has forced the Prussian Third Corps to launch attacks, try to free these guys, otherwise they're going to be doomed. And those will be out of supply losses. Well, they'll actually probably end up being combat losses, so we don't have to worry about that. Because they're going to get an attack or retreat. They're not going to be able to get out of there. Over here, the Brits launching attacks both against the Cav, which we can't get away from because we've got Cav on both sides, and also on this side of the of Ney's little command. Not sure what to do if that falters or breaks, because I can't let the Brits get behind me, so I'm going to have to, detach more forces into that quadrant. It's pretty hard for the Brits to clog all the roads going south, but, well, I mean, I guess they could stretch a line across here or something, but their forces coming in from behind could prove to be a real threat. Pausing partway through the French combat phase because not much happened here. The French took the, hey, it doesn't really matter if you get an attack or retreat due to being out of command, or if you get it off the chart itself, or if you take a cav retreat before combat, in this case here, where I was attacking at good enough odds that I was pretty much assured to retreat because I wasn't in command. That position is degrading. It's falling apart. But over here, the French, this is what I wanted to catch before it actually takes effect. The French have a couple of corps here, the 6th Corps and the Cav, just trying to demolish the Prussian 3rd Corps by coming around the flank. And now here, we're doing an all-out frontal assault. That's probably not going to get us much, but it may put the Prussians in a difficult position where their counterattacks are going to be really ugly comparatively. We'll see how that all works out. I couldn't bring the 1st Corps into play yet, but I've got Napoleon up here now. What is he stacked with? I don't know why those aren't further forward, but we'll assume they couldn't move further. Yeah, they were facing this way. I should be able to push them forward a little bit. Okay. So the position the Prussians are in with this flank hanging out here, that's in a lot of danger now that Napoleon's going to be able to command 1st Corps Vendôme and send him into D'Erlon, and send him into play, Vendôme's 3rd, against that flank. So the Prussian position looks really horrible. When I was first setting up that defense, hey, it looked like they'd be able to hold. With the preponderance of French force here, it's not working. Of course, there's a cost to putting that much strength on that one flank. Results over here with Grouchy's wing pretty much crushing the 3rd Corps, but Napoleon almost entirely repulsed. Now there were opportunities where the Prussians, they're green, they look like Russians to me. The Prussians could have moved forward on an advance to try to cut the French apart. But what I really want to do is get out of here because I just lost a second of my 3 Corps, and I've got to find another defensive line. I don't, with this gone, I can't hold this little piece here no matter what. So instead of advancing, which might have cut apart later French retreats, I've chosen to try to hold back. Well, I still have to fight in a couple of places where the French did advance, but at least maybe I can maintain some sort of cohesive position. It's going to be tough, though, because I can't get out of here. So I've got to kind of slither a little bit back at a time and just hope that the French don't completely overwhelm the Russian position. Another option is just to leave a couple of units behind and run for the hills. And that may be the wiser option. I'm not sure which way we're going. The Prussians continue to manage to fall back a little bit. Being out of command makes it easier because you know you're going to be retreating on pretty much any close to even odds result. Like if you can run anywhere between 1 to 2 and 3 to 1, you can make sure you're retreating. Of course, you probably don't have much control over what gets thrown in there. But someone like Blücher, one of the commanders, can throw a unit in to an attack that's still going to end up an out-of-command attack. So there's a little bit of, you can throw some reinforcements in knowing what the retreat's going to look like. The only thing you might not know is whether or not the French cav will have to pursue, right? And then over here, wow, we knocked out the rest of Kellerman's little cav division or whatever. And then we're pushing our way through here, and it really looks like the whole Quatre-Bras map is going to be a failure for the French. The only question is, and the answer is yes, but can I defend the lines back, my lines of communication back, or will I have to pivot my army and leave, a screening force against the Prussians, or a pursuit force against them, and use the majority of my force against the Brits, which that's why I say yes, I have this opportunity, I have a couple of choices here. This probably isn't going to hold it, but can I send one corps? Is that enough to help? Or do I need to send Napoleon and his force to stem the bleeding over there? And of course, the Brits can't continue to push on if the Prussians aren't holding something in this area. Because if we start falling back this way, the French then can come around and march off to Brussels, and that's pretty much game over. So I've got to be prepared to disengage the Brits as well in this circumstance. This is turning out to be a really interesting situation compared to what I saw over in Le Retour, where the second day was kind of like the actual second day, mainly wasted. Here, because Ligny was not a victory for the French, really, or not a massive victory, it's fallen into a second day. And because of that second day, we've got this massive attack by the Anglo-Allied army that, is threatening Napoleon's position there. As an example of a lot of work, basically I'm building my attack from the flanks in. This isn't complete yet. Slowly moving, figuring out which pieces I have that can move, and then trying to get the proper strength points for the odds charts. Now, these odds charts are more forgiving than, say, the Avalon Hill style ones, but all the same, you still want to be really careful to make sure that you hit them correctly everywhere. The numbers on these counters aren't obnoxiously big as they are in some later games, for the most part. So the calculations are a little bit easier, but it's still a pain in the butt figuring out, okay, I got a 1-to-1. Is 1-to-1 okay? Yeah. In this game, 1-to-1 is okay, usually, because it's just a push. You're just shoving the enemy, and you want to make sure that you're not losing ground. But the question, of course, is, are you losing position that might end up just disintegrating your line on an attack? Will the defender stand? And if they choose to stand, are you screwed by making that 1-to-1 attack in that particular case? Anyway, that's pretty much the end of the Prussian army. The third corps disintegrated here, so all three corps, I think, are wrecked. Well, the second corps may not be wrecked. This guy's back there, it's not wrecked. He's back there trying to funnel more stuff. But all the same, 2 of the 3 corps commanders are gone. That means none of those units can ever come back. So those 2 corps are permanently gone. And this is the second corps, and it's kind of trapped within that set of teeth there. And likewise this, we didn't succeed over here, so we got flung back, but we've got them surrounded. If they don't break their way out, they're going to be destroyed due to lack of supply, I think. The Brits are doing much, much better, but it's too late. They're not going to be able to stop what's going on here. So I think maybe the best solution for the Allies at this point is to try to get out with whatever I can. Obviously, the British force can get out. Now, the question with the Brits is, do they want to try to stomp on Ney's command a little bit more? Because it will take longer for the French to make it into the Waterloo area than it will for the Brits to march down this way. So careful about supply. It only comes into effect on the first daylight turn of each day. So, I thought these guys were just doomed. I mean, they are, but a little bit more effort has to be put in. They have to fight. And obviously, this guy has to fight. This guy can't enter his zone. He's no longer in command. So, PM and the rains are coming, and the Brits have definitely, throwing Uxbridge's big cav unit in, have managed to just pound into Ney's position. They just get flung back here towards the center, but otherwise they're beginning to get rid of Real's forces. On the other hand, the Prussian army is, like I said, disintegrating. I was able to do a little bit of tricky kung fu here, retreating one French unit so that I could clear a retreat path for one of the Prussian units. That was kind of nice. It was actually, I had a couple of units I could put under command under Blucher so that I would get a possibility of being able to not retreat and force a defender retreat. But yeah, there's just not much left. And this is beginning to look like the aftermath of Ligny, but it's a little late. I think the main reason is I didn't have the feel for the system, how to crack a line. That, you know, it takes some getting used to each time that I come back to these games. And they do not play historically if you don't know all the little tricks. They play very poorly, actually. They play more like a World War I line. Odds reduction in order to prevent myself from taking exchanges that I don't really want to take, but that causes holes like this to develop where, I can attack or retreat instead of the exchange. And then over here, again, mixed results. I didn't get as much as I would have hoped, but I did kill off a couple more units on both of the flanks. And the Prussian side over here advanced back into this town, and then the Brits, their cav had to advance, even though heavily outnumbered overall, just because they won the retreat result. Again, on an odds reduction attack. I mean, the Brits are probably going to come full on anyway, so it's not that big a deal. It's just, it's kind of annoying when you get your units stuck that way, like to fly paper. It's largely just getting shoved here, although they did lose a couple of units from Second Corps. In a couple of cases, yeah, Rail's getting himself chewed up here. He's almost wrecked. There's just not much I can do except I could pull him from the line and ensure retreats, but it's similar to what's happening to the Prussians here, but on a smaller scale. They're just getting wiped out. Now the Second Corps actually was temporarily demoralized, and they'll probably be fully demoralized pretty soon. They just keep filtering troops forward, though, so they can kind of recover as long as I keep the commander out of command range. This means they had to retreat all their units in combat, but that's okay. I had enough strength that I was able to actually avoid taking any real losses, I think. Since this is the last turn before the first of the rain turns, basically from here to here we're not going to see any combat whatsoever. And then, whatever. Now, it may be impossible for one side or the other to withdraw, or at least to withdraw all of its forces, because you can't leave during rain or night, you can't leave an enemy zone of control, and you can't fight. There's no way away, so you just kind of settle down and sleep next to each other or something, I don't know. During the rain, too. We saw the effects of the night, which prevented recovery. The rain doesn't prevent recovery. Trying to see if there was anything else in the night. Yeah, all units are considered to be out of command, which means they move more slowly at night as well. But in essence, it's pretty close to the same thing, which is we're not going to be fighting. And the problem is, hey, I'm engaging pretty hard. I don't think I want to stay in contact with the Brits, but what if the French are able to somehow force that? And it's possible, especially with my cav up there, that if I'm attacking with the cav, that they're going to end up stuck in combat with the French, and then I'll have to, probably abandon them. I'm trying not to engage them on that final turn if possible, but we don't know. I think we failed, though, in terms of breaking the French line down there. And I think we have to try to extricate our Prussians as best as we can to give some support to the Fourth Corps, because this just doesn't serve any purpose. The thing is, though, the big old Fourth Corps shows up during this night phase, which is to say, hey, if I'm in an okay position, I can strengthen it significantly. Okay is a hard thing to call, though, when this trail is available to the French. French failure here, and this is a problem. I got to keep this surrounded now, because otherwise it can trace back to here and then all the way back, unless I cut, its roads, which wouldn't be an unreasonable thing. I could leave one unit back here to cut the road, and that would cause it to dissolve, which would be cheaper. Over here, the French advanced, but at some losses. The First Corps took a couple of casualties there in an exchange result that I could have avoided, but I really wanted the hex very badly, but then it didn't turn out as well as I thought. Anyway, I've got a bunch of Prussians engaged, so it looks to me like the Prussian army is not really getting away here. The remnants of it, whatever I can recover of the Second Corps at least, will be available, but we've got some destroyed units. And then over here, the French lost the unit on the line. The British are now clear of the French, so they didn't have to make any advances, so they'll pull out, because otherwise the French army just swings around and grabs Brussels, right? So it's 3 p.m. The rain stopped. You can see the British, or the rain's starting. The British are disengaging. No problem there. The one difficulty, though, is, hey, those Prussians had to retreat. French advanced. They keep the Prussians pinned in a few cases. I've got basically 3 French corps pinned down, though, by the one, well, there's parts of the First Corps in here and whatnot, but basically by one Prussian corps. That may be a fair trade-off. I may be willing to stay the night trying to hold this. I've got the big Prussian Fourth Corps, which, depending on what the French do, so the French can threaten this entire force. In fact, the Prussians, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they got units that aren't going to be in supply no matter what I do. So I think I'm going to abandon some of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they're not going to be able to trace supply no matter what. This unit can, but basically, to me, it looks like we're going to take some losses, and we'll probably end up abandoning the position and saving what we can of the Prussians, because what's back there just is in a horrible location. And then we'll see something similar to the historic Waterloo probably start to develop. Question is what happens in the Wavre side of things. We've got a bunch of Prussians coming in, the Fourth Corps. They come in here, I think. 25-12 is what I see. Here, yeah. And may be able to interfere with any attempt by the French to push this way. Some of these might be able to help in that interference. So that leaves the French with a few options. First of all, I've got a couple of corps that are stuck back here watching the Prussians. Now, the Prussians are going to dissolve overnight, so it's not that big a deal. I could actually dispatch those corps and just leave a couple of units watching them. And I could swing up this way for the quicker approach to the historic Waterloo and use Napoleon that way. Or I could try to bust through here. We should do a quick count of how many points we have. I know it's not enough to win the game yet, but to give us a view of, gee, if we bust up the Prussians harder, is that enough? Because maybe we don't need to try to bust through at Waterloo. It's tough terrain there, and know, we've seen those British troops. They're fairly good quality. Unless I can get an outflank on them, this combat system doesn't really work for frontal assaults. It doesn't. It's not effective. Okay, frontal assaults aren't effective. I'm not saying they should be, but I'd rather not be in the position Napoleon felt he was in at Waterloo, which was, hey, I have to attack them head on where they're strongest, because I need to bust through to get the remaining points. So point-wise, it's 118 to 32. If I take that 32 off, we get to 86. That 118, almost all of it is permanent losses. The only thing that isn't is about 20 points of it. Still, I'm nowhere near the 230. And I'd have to look at these and try to see, hey, how much more do I have? So that's like 5, 9, 18, 24, 29, 39, another 43 points up there in the second corps, and whatever's left. We're just not going to get to 230 by busting up the Prussians. So I think we need to clear the route. And the question is, well, what's the best way to get there? And, the speediest way might be trying to cut through here, because we've gotten quite far already. Historically, that second day was pretty much wasted by the French. They could have probably pushed through in the Wavre sector, but instead they kind of gave it up. And the Prussians actually blew some bridges and stuff like that, where the French force, also the French force that was sent in that direction, was not as heavy as what I'm sending. So it might be to the best of my advantage to try to get an outflank in this direction. The only danger to that is I need to keep this road, if I'm going to make that connection, if I'm going to make that cross here, this road has to be kept open. But I don't see too much difficulty with that. And as I open this road, then I can move to this road. I just have to keep shifting where my supply source is, and it depends on where the Brits decide to make their stand or whatever. If they make it all the way back at Waterloo, they should have no problem sliding across. So I may send quite a bit of the force in that direction rather than trying to limp units this way. We'll see. All right, so this one's going up at 2 p.m. on the 18th, or I can't remember, 17th. I can never remember what the dates are. It's not like it should be, but it's not like Gettysburg for me, where the fact that it happens near the 4th of July helps. All right, let's send this up then.